I know when you get on the end of Ignite curriculum, we tend not to have as many robust classes, right? People have been through 11 of these sessions already. So for those of you who have stuck through this, that is awesome. I know that everybody who teaches an Ignite class kind of comes at it from a little different angle. So we're going to, we're going to come at this hopefully a little different today. I like collaboration on these. I like there to be some interactivity. If I ask a question to anybody on here and you don't know the answer, that's okay. I'm not going to go, out of my way to call people out that I don't think would have a specific answer. At the same time, I want to make it very clear that we will not be going the full session today. So when I look at those calendars and see 2.5 hour classes, I say, my God, I know that's how this course is built to play out, but I'm pretty sure we can deliver probably even more information in a shorter period of time where everybody's able to be hyper focused. So for me, after an hour and a half, everything else that comes in just kind of goes over the top. So we're going to stay hyper focused on this. We're going to move through the content and we're going to share a lot of stories and real life examples as we walk through this. And I'm going to use a lot of what my team and I do as a basis for talking through this closing process or this under contract process. That doesn't mean that this is gospel, right? It doesn't mean you have to do it this way. Guys, if you're not talking, if you could just mute your microphones for me, please. It doesn't mean that you have to do it the way that I'm doing. It just means that this is the way that I suggest you do it. I've had over 1,000 transactions flying every which way, things going wrong, things popping up to where every single time in the closing process, something went wrong. I changed the closing process so that particular piece can never happen again, right? And this is one of the things about this business that's really exciting. We can get absolutely all over ourselves when we make a mistake, when we miss something, or when it's even not our fault and something goes wrong, but yet do nothing to the system to change it and leave the door open for it to happen again. How many times have you heard somebody say, oh my God, I can't believe that happened again? On the flip side, if we, every time something goes wrong, make a change to the way we do business and say, I will never let that happen again. That will never happen again. Even if it's not my fault or anybody in our circle. What check, balance, process can we put in place to take that gap out of the mix so we don't have to worry about that happening the next time? And over time, that's developed a really seamless process that has seen a ton of things go wrong and also pulled together and held together a whole ton of things as well after, based on the experiences of what happened before. So understand that when I come at you guys with certain processes, with days I do certain things and how the system flows, there's a reason for all of it. If after you say, hey, why do you do it that way? If I didn't explain it a specific way, please don't hesitate to reach out. I'd be more than happy to answer any of those questions for you guys as well. So we're going to jump in. I'm going to do a screen share here of the content, if it opens. Bear with me 1 second, guys. I told you I updated my iOS this morning, which is probably not the best day to do that. And I'd love to share my screen, but it's telling me I have to open my network preferences here. All right, I think I solved this. If not, we're going to go at it without a screen.
You're good.
We're good here?
Yep.
Okay. See, I'm better at this whole tech thing than I thought. It's always interesting how things actually work sometimes. All right, everybody can see the screen here? All right, I saw Fred's thumbs up, so I'm going to take that as everybody's saying yes. So today's course and Ignite is called Close the Deal, right? And this is a hybrid course in that we're not just focusing on how we close a deal, because clearly that's an important part of the process. That's a very transactional part of reaching the final goal and getting paid, which hopefully some of you guys are also excited about. But it's also a really important point in time in the transaction to build a foundation for referrals to come in, right? You are able to ask for referrals in the moment, right? And if you have a strong enough process, if you have strong enough communication skills through this closing process, you should be able to pull at least one referral out of that part of the process as well. Many of you guys have heard that the most excitable time to get someone to refer you a client is in the transaction itself, which is true, right? If you're out showing houses to somebody and you're providing good service in that moment, the chances are they're talking to other people who are also looking at houses, and you might be able to use that as an avenue to get in front of them. Sometimes that's not the case, but most of the time it is. By law of attraction, people are going to find themselves in the same circle as other people. And when someone's excited about it, it's much easier to generate a referral as opposed to after the transaction is closed, which is ironically when most people decide to start asking for referrals, right? Like, hey, I want to prove that I can do a good job. And then once I prove that I can do a good job, then I'm going to ask for referrals. But the truth of the matter is they're working with you because they trust that you will do a good job, or else they would not be working with you. And if that's the case, then take that as permission for you to seek the referrals throughout the process too. But we want to have a seamless experience in this under contract phase that converts a client into a raving fan who's going to continually drive other clients our way. So we can continue to deliver that same level of service to additional people too, and keep that cycle going on and on. Last piece before we jump in, a lot of people in today's world, a lot of companies in today's world are focused on consumer experience, okay? As realtors, a lot of realtors are still playing a very old school game where there is no experience, it's just a service. And that's good to a certain extent, but understand that there are a lot of other companies playing that game and beginning real positioning on creating a consumer experience fully end to end, including your brokerage, so that the consumer is so infatuated with that experience that one, they're willing to pay more for it, one, or two, they're willing to pay for it at all, right, as a buyer. But three, that it deepens the level of excitement that a client has through working with you, and deepens and increases the ability for them to pass you a difference in the future. So as we talk through this, I really want everybody to focus on what the experience is that your client has with you, maybe outside of just service. What other parts go in? So when somebody's done, they're like, wow, that was an amazing experience, right? What are we providing them as support? What are we providing them as materials? And certainly the backbone of the experience is the service that we mentioned before. Okay, so we're going to get started. I just talked about the things that we're going to be talking about here today. The expectations are to really focus on those two components. What exactly our closing process looks like, how we handle it structurally, and then to take a look at the flip side and how we use that to generate referrals when we ask for referrals and bring that through. So those of you who are partaking in Ignite as a daily session, who followed this so far, there are certain actions that need to take place through each individual process. For those of you who are on this call who are just in to hear about the under contract process, the next couple minutes may seem a little, but just bear with me. We'll get to the better stuff, I promise. For those of you who are in Ignite to learn these habits to bring your business to the next level, we're going to spend a little bit of time here out of the gate and focus on some important things. So my chat box, guys, if anybody can shoot to me in the chat box a thumbs up if in the last 2 days, you could just give me a Y sign too. If in the last 2 days you have prospected in any way, shape, or form, right? Whether that's note cards, stuffing envelopes, calling contacts direct. Has anybody done anything along those lines? All right, awesome. Awesome. So I got a bunch of yeses in here, guys. This is really important. So one of my favorite real estate sales trainers, his name is Gene Rivers. He boils our business down to something so simple. As human beings, especially as realtors, a lot of times we tend to complicate things, make them way more complicated than they should. At its essence, our best in this business does not boil down to how well we know the real estate business. Sadly, it doesn't boil down to our experience level. It doesn't boil down to how long we've been doing this, even if we had no experience in it. What it boils down to is how many conversations we have with people about real estate, right? How many people do I talk to about real estate? The more people I talk to, the more conversations I have, interactions that I have, the more homes I'm going to sell. It is that simple. And if you don't believe me, do your own little test. Take 2 months and call 100 a week and see how many contracts you originate, and then take 2 months and don't call anyone and see how many contracts you originate. I'm actually not endorsing you do the second part of that. I know how that'll play out, but it's really important, guys, that we take a look in ourselves and say, what are we really preparing for to make our business explode, right? Are we preparing for that moment where we have all the experience? Oh, now I know what's going to happen next. So now I'm comfortable in taking that next step to do a lot of business. Or am I doing what I need to do to originate a ton of business out of the gate? And just by having those at bats, the experience then comes off of it. Right. I had a really impactful experience with a presenter a long time ago who came out. It was a gentleman in a wheelchair, and he said to the room full, he said, "Hey, do you guys know what business you're in?" So I'm going to open up by asking you guys the same, right? What is the real business that we're in? If we want to stay in business, what is the real main business that we're in? Can anybody let me know what they think the answer is? And the wrong answers are fine. So don't be afraid to do that.
The business of people.
We are in a people business, 100%. Yep. So customer service, Mike, customer service. Relationship business, Pedro Maria, it's true. Lead gen business, we got Fred, Pat, matchmakers. I love it. Sean had mentioned lead gen business before here too. So listen, at its core, they're all right. We are in a service business. We are in a relationships business. We are in a matchmaking business. We are in a lead gen business. But that last one, that lead gen, is really the beginning of everything. Every office has an agent, full transaction process inside and out. They know all the rules, all the books, and they sell 1 or 2 houses a year. Another one is, has a person who's extremely well networked, knows 1 million people, and sells 1 or 2 houses a year. because the relationships that they have are not focused at any point on generating leads. Our success in this business is dependent on our ability to create leads. And we do that by talking to people or communicating with people about real estate. Now, some people have taken that digitally. They're using social media to connect and communicate with people about real estate and magnify that on a larger scale. And then for others, it's much more personal. It's one-to-one. It's the contacts, it's the connections. So I want everybody to make sure that they keep in their mind as a refresher, when we prospecting and we use that word, we actually changed that word on our team. We don't use prospecting because it has some negative connotations, in my opinion, attached to it. It gets a bad rap. And it feels like we're like hunting, right? We're going out and hunting. We instead use a word called outreach. So it's a time for outreach where we're just going to have conversations about real estate with people and see who needs help, right? Who needs some value, who has some questions, and we're here to assist in that. And just by having those conversations, we see everything fall in line as far as our numbers, our conversions, and then comes our opportunity to provide the customer service. Then comes our opportunity to be the matchmaker. Then comes our opportunity to bring all of those other pieces into play so that we can actually do what it is that we functionally do, and that's sell homes. But without the opportunity and without the lead, we have nothing. So find your niche, find the way, the place you're comfortable in leads. Do not think about letting your foot off of that pedal, especially if you're in this business, because a lot of people just have a false sense of what this business is. And I want to reinforce that right now. So in our action reveal, a bunch of you guys had said that you've already, made some calls, reached out to people in the last couple of days. Our program here has people set to do our daily 10-4, which means we're going to add 10 new contacts to your database a day. Speak with 10 people in your database a day and write 10 notes a day. And then every week, preview 10 homes. That's a nice way for you, become and stay familiar with the inventory. But let me ask one more. Which of you in this chat put a Y if we have done 1, 2, and 3 from your lead generation habits here? At all in the last week. So it's now Wednesday. So whether it be today, yesterday, or Monday, in one day, added 10 new contacts, spoke with 10 people from your database, and wrote 10 notes. Awesome. Pedro and Maria. I was pretty sure I wasn't going to get anybody saying yes. But that is phenomenal that you guys did that. And Sharon, 1 and 2, right? That's pretty common, right? We have a mix of some of these things. But I just say this, that structurally, we have to find, as agents, the process that allows us to stay steady with this process on a daily basis every single week, right? If you and your schedule are not capable of 10 new contacts, speaking with 10 people, and writing 10 notes over the course of a day, then you have to change those numbers to something that you are capable of doing and committed to doing. If you feel like the undertaking is just taking too much willpower, if you find yourself doing it 3 days in a row and then running out of gas, right? Because maybe you got some other things at home that you're taking care of, I highly recommend that rather than keep fighting this fight and potentially giving up, right? And a lot of sales trainers will not agree with me here, and I really don't care because I believe they're wrong. When we strive for something that takes so much willpower and we can't get to a point of momentum and consistency, eventually we run out of gas, we give up. And when that happens a couple different times, then guess what? We don't do it at all, right? To build that momentum from a human perspective is vital, in that by getting momentum in the direction of what our ultimate goal is, it makes the process and the progress easier. So I will say, for those of you who are struggling, either time-wise, take this 10, 10, 10 and knock it down to 3, 3, 3 or 2, 2, 2, right? If you have all day and nothing to do, you'd be crazy to do that. But if you do have time, if you don't have time, or you're feeling really tight, right? If this is a second career for you and you're trying to make it work, break it out so it's 2 new contacts to your database a day, 2 people that you spoke with, and 2 notes. You can also, guys, mix and match so that your weekly numbers become your focus as opposed to daily. So I go back to Gene Rivers. Gene's team used to prospect every single day, which kind of prevents you from getting momentum going sometimes. They shifted it to where they just do Tuesday mornings and Thursday evenings, 2 6-hour blocks. But by doing that, they're getting the same amount in. They're actually more effective in their outreach block. And it leaves the rest of the week wide open for them to schedule things because maybe they couldn't do it every day. So 2 tips on this stuff, guys. I want you to focus on picking a number that you can at the end of the week say, I did it. I nailed it, right? I got my 2. And now maybe next week I want to up that to 3, right? It's like going to the gym. We go to the gym, we want to get in shape. We have the perfect workout in our mind. It's, lifting for 45 minutes and then 45 minutes cardio. And we do it 3 days in a row and we're spent and we're shot and we don't go for another couple days. And there goes the whole habit. Let's focus on gaining momentum. Let's focus on building habits. And if we have to dial some of these numbers back to make it attainable so that you're doing the same thing every day and building momentum in the right direction, I want you guys to do that. I also want you to focus on connecting with your spheres, right? And this is something I know that most of you have been doing through this program. And those of you who've been in the business here a while, that's a really important part of your business. But simple, easy calls, contacts with people that you know to just connect, just talk about real estate, right? That is vital for you being able to comfortably outreach and grow your business in a natural way. There are people who love the cold call, right? They love to drill expireds and they love the challenge of a for sale by owner and someone throwing 4-letter words at them every couple minutes, right? And how to maneuver around that and still get them to meet. And that's great. That's valid. Percentage wise, those people that you're contacting are going to have a far higher percentage of having an immediate real estate need because they've already essentially raised their hand and expressed that. But long-term, for certain people, that is not a sustainable source of leads, right? It might be functionally, but it might not be mentally. And I think at the very least, there should be a combination of those platforms to come through. So I'm a huge advocate of reaching out to our sphere, and we're through this one little practice blip here as part of Ignite, and then I'm going to jump into the under contracts part here that I promised. A lot of you have heard this if you spent any time, listening to me in a coaching capacity over the last couple of years. From my perspective, the indirect way of bringing up real estate is the most valuable tool that we can tool belt, right? If we're having a conversation with somebody that has nothing to do with real estate, and yet we can coach it into bringing up real estate. So we now have the opportunity to ask for business, explain the market, maybe in a 10-second blurb, and then move the conversation along. It allows us to tastefully interject outreach, prospecting, all of the above into normal everyday conversation, which allows people to be magnets for business without the heavy stress and burden of putting themselves in a box saying, I have to lead gen for this particular period of time every single day. Now, you still do have to, but the process by which you do it, if we keep it natural, is a much easier, more fluid, and certainly sustainable way that people fall in love with, as opposed to saying, hey, I got to do this every day. It's a nightmare, and then I can enjoy the rest of my day. I'll use Ronnie for a quick example, and then we'll jump into this. So Ron, if you watch him and watch his schedule, is really not someone who will sit in a particular area and prospect and lead gen for any period, right? There's really not a ton of purposeful focus in there with everything that's going on. But if you spend a day with Ron and watch him talk to people over the course of the day, he will have 30 conversations minimum with all different people, just based on being out and about. And in a very good portion of those, real estate comes up. So he is prospecting, he is outreaching more so than most people who forcefully sit in a specific area and do that for a certain period of time. But it's a much more natural process, and I can assure you that it works, right? So I'm gonna talk through just a little script that I use, super simple, and then I'm gonna want everybody on this call. We're gonna take 5 minutes. I'm gonna want everybody on this call to pick up the phone and call somebody and work through this script. Ask for business, not on purpose, or have an out where you could still bring up real estate. So I'm going to set the table for this right now, and then I'm going to ask if there are any questions. When we call somebody on the phone, one of the biggest fears is that we don't have anything to say, that we don't want to be viewed as salespeople, which is funny because we really are salespeople. But we don't want to be viewed as a salesperson who's calling for just that. So here's my advice. Do not call for just that. As salespeople, as realtors, as agents, our one job is to win the battle for mind share in the consumer's mind, so that when the consumer thinks of realtor, they think of you, right? Statistics say that the consumer has in their mind the ability to remember 2 people in any given profession. So if I ask you to name a dentist, statistically, you'd be able to name a dentist. If I asked you to name a second one, statistically, it would take you a minute or so, but then you'd name a second one. If I asked you to name a third, you could no longer do it, right? And again, that's statistically. So there's going to be people who fall on either side of that. The key is, if we can position ourselves in the mind of the consumer to be in that number 1 or number 2 slot, when somebody thinks about real estate, we have now put ourselves in a position to generate a ton of business from that individual, whether it be a referral or whether it be from them and their business direct, right? So how do we do that? If we focus our prospecting block or our outreach block on having to get business, that exchange is unnatural in my opinion. And I'm not saying don't work off of scripts that lead someone to give you business. There are people and there are times when you can sit there and run through a script that's really pulling business out of people, and you can nail 15 people in a 5-minute period, and by the law of numbers, you're going to get leads, right? My approach is different. It's a little longer term. It's a little deeper, but it creates this wave of business that never stops coming. When I reach out, when our team reaches out from a lead gen perspective, our goal is to simply work to make sure we're still positioned in mindshare. And the only reason or only way we need to do that is to connect with the individual, build the relationship, as some of you guys had said, make that relationship deeper, and also somewhere in there, mention real estate. When we mention real estate, it makes that neuro connection between me, deep relationship, and realtor. A lot of people just miss the realtor part. So they have deep relationships with people, and then that person goes and lists their house with somebody else, and they get all pissed off, right? They're all upset. They feel like the person stabbed them in the back. They were their best friend. They didn't call them. It was their cousin. They didn't call them. It's not because they don't love you. It's not because they don't trust you. It's because you lost the mindshare battle with another agent. Another agent became the person that they thought of when they thought of real estate. They might trust you with their kids. They might hold you to a much higher regard. But if we're not tying it back to real estate somehow, and it can be only for a second, then we run the risk of losing that mind share. So how are these conversations going to go? Very simply, ring, ring, somebody answers the phone. And I'll give you a quick script for voicemail if somebody doesn't answer the phone. Have a reason to call them. I have a whole list of reasons to call people that aren't really even reasons, right? One might be, Hey, I was driving through the neighborhood the other day and I passed the old house and I thought of you. I've been meaning to reach out and see how you and the family are doing. How are things? That's a reason to pick up the phone and call. Most people feel uncomfortable with making a call because they don't even have a reason to. So you need to first script that reason, and anybody can borrow that. If you talk to anybody from grew up in or anything like that, feel free to use that one. If it's maybe somebody you went to college with, right? You pick up the phone and go, oh my God, the other day I was just thinking of, Montclair State, and I figured I haven't talked to you in a long time. So I just wanted to check in. I wanted to see how you and the family are doing. Oh man, that's awesome. That's great, right? That gave you the reason to call. And that is your main reason to call. Your main reason is not calling based on real estate, right? We continue with the conversation. How's the family? How's the wife? How are the kids? Blah, blah, blah. One of two things are going to happen. Either they're going to bring up real estate or you're going to bring up work. If they ask you about real estate, you should have very little elevator speech that at its very simplest form says, oh my God, things are absolutely crazy in this business right now, right? There's not enough homes to sell out there for the amount of buyers, right? But we're always looking to facilitate, the best service we can. So if you know anybody who's looking to buy or sell anything, please don't hesitate to let me know. Sound good? Good. Okay. That was it. That was all I needed in this conversation to reinforce it, because I built the relationship already and now I'm tying it back to real estate. If they don't bring up real estate, then you're going to bring up work, right? If the person's name is Jim, say, hey, Jim, listen, how's work, right? Where are you working these days? By bringing up work, what is the natural response you're going to get from that person? Anybody? After
they're going to ask you how
They're
work
going to
is
ask you
for
about your job too.
That's it. That's it. And opening that door in no way, shape, or form is going to think the reason you called was about real estate, because they're actually asking you about your work, right? And I can tell you, those of you who are just really warming up to this, if nobody brings up real estate, if they don't take the bait, if they answer back and seem like they want to get off the phone, then just have real estate in your closing line. And this is a line that I have used for a long time. And it's, hey, listen, if you guys need anything at all, even if it's not real estate related, please don't hesitate to give me a shout. So I'm setting the bar there. Like, if you need anything, even if it has nothing to do with real estate, please give me a call. Again, I'm closing out what should have been a very strong relationship building call, base touch. It may have only been 2 or 3 minutes, but I'm letting them know indirectly at the end, I'm tying it back to the fact that I'm a realtor and I'm in real estate. And when we make those types of calls, they're great. They're building relationships. They're natural. They're healthy. You do want to check in with this person and see how they're doing. And by bringing up real estate, either indirectly by asking them how work is, or directly by them asking you how work is, or just at the end by tailing it by saying, even if it has nothing to do with real estate, I'm here for whatever it is that you need. You're drawing that parallel, you're drawing that line in your battle for mind share with the consumer. So I'm going to take 5 minutes here, guys. It is 1:05. I would like to 1:10 you guys to mute your phones, to pick up your phone, go through it, right? Find somebody maybe you haven't talked to in a little while. Maybe somebody you talked to a couple months ago, maybe somebody whose house you drove by a couple of months ago. And I want you to make that one call, and I want you to have a quick back and forth conversation and tastefully drop in real estate or invite them to bring up real estate and then close the conversation out. You should be able to get out of these conversations in 5 minutes and keep it natural and focus on building the relationship, not getting the lead. Let's see what happens, guys. So we're going to pause this for 5.
I mean, I was joking with Phyllis saying, I want to get her the pants for her birthday, maybe I should get it for you too.
All right, guys, we'll give it the countdown here. I figured I might not get one or two people back who got pulled into a conversation, but we'll give it an extra couple seconds and then we'll jump into the transition. All right, guys, I'm going to jump back into things here. So if you were able to have a conversation with somebody, please give me a Y in the chat box. Good job, Caitlin. It's really important, guys, that we make sure when we're having these outreach moments that we have the ability, and this comes with time, to get in and out of conversations relatively quickly, right? 5 minutes is a good amount of time to connect with somebody you haven't talked to in a while. Of course, there's going to be times where you connect even deeper and you're on the phone with the same person for 20, 25 minutes. But structurally, you try to avoid those types of calls and considering that active outreach time, because you can, in that situation, essentially talk to two people and be off the grid for 45 minutes and not really have touched enough people to make a full impact on your business. So we want to keep these to around 5 minutes. How many people, if you got a voicemail, do me a favor and jump in the chat box and just write VM. If the person that you called had a voicemail that picked up, let's pop that in there, VM. Oh man, so no voicemails, but only one person got a call. Caitlin, I appreciate you being open and on the offense here. I'm hoping that the rest of us are still on those calls practicing. But one little trick, guys, before we move on here, and I have with voicemail, is one general rule I have for outreach is that we never leave a voicemail asking the person to call us back, right? Which is kind of the opposite of, oh, nice, Kevin. That's kind of the opposite of what normally takes place, right? You usually leave a message. You say, Donna, great job. You would say, Donna, hey, it's Donna Nelson. Long time no talk. I was just driving through the neighborhood today and I've been meaning to reach out and just see how you and the family are doing. When you get a chance, give me a call back. Thanks so much. Bye. That's a normal voicemail. The problem is this: people are super busy, and By asking anybody to do anything like call you back, you have now shut down your ability to call them again socially until they have called you back, right? Guys, in the chat box, please put there, give me a why if you have had a voicemail come in and had every intention on calling them back, but got super busy. And then it was like the next day, and then maybe 2 days later, and you were like, I didn't call that person back yet. Has anybody been in that position before? If so, please put a Y in the chat box for me. Yeah. I mean, and I'm sure even the people who haven't put it in there, 100%, right? We've all been there. We have people that we have really good intentions of talking to who leave us voicemails, and then for whatever reason, we get caught up and we just don't have the opportunity to call them back. Now, what's interesting is when they ask you to call them back and you don't, after a certain period of time, it now becomes awkward to call them back in some cases. But what becomes more awkward is when you see them and they didn't call you back the last time, because you're asking yourself, hey, is there an issue that I'm not aware of? Why didn't that person call me back? And that person's saying, oh my God, I never called Bill back the last time. So now I'm going to do what a lot of people do, and that's dodge them, right? I don't want to face that conversation. And some people just say, hey, look, oh my God, I totally forgot to call you back. But understand that human psychology, a lot of them are not going to be comfortable in that mode. So if you're walking through the food store and the person that you had left a message for a month or two ago and asked to call you back that never called you back sees you, especially with the mask on, they might just dodge you and go in the next aisle because they don't want to have that conversation. So now we've created a world where the people that we want to connect with are actually avoiding us simply because we asked them to do something. Same goes for prospecting. Same goes for lead follow-up. If you get a lead, hi, this is Bill Boswell, Keller Williams Realty. I just got your contact information regarding the property at 19 Point Road. Please give me a call back as soon as you have a chance. Thanks so much. Bye. By me asking them to call me back, I've now socially ruined my ability to follow up with them again the next day, right? Because that would be weird because they didn't call me back. So there should be some unwritten rule that maybe they don't want to talk to me. So now I'm going to call them again. It's a little strange. So when you're leaving a voicemail, guys, just a little tip, always leave it open-ended. My voicemails often are along the lines of, hey, look, I know you're super busy. You know, I'm pretty busy too. So if and when you have the opportunity, feel free to give me a shout. If not, I look forward to catching up with you in the future, right? And just leaving it open-ended so they're not obligated to call you back. A lot of times that'll initiate just a text. Hey, got your message. Great to hear your voice. We'll talk sometime. That's all I need, right? And sometimes I don't even need that. But now if in a couple of days something else pops up or a house pops up on their block that I want to call them and talk to them about, I still have that open door because I didn't shut it down by asking them to call me back. So another little tip, trick, tool so we can do that. So from Donna Nelson, she left a voicemail last week to a past client and said, no need to call me back. He texted her 4 days later saying he was on vacation. I know you said I didn't have to call you back, but I wanted to say thanks for reaching out. So that's a perfect example of what I'm saying. He might not have called her back or contacted her at all if he was away because of the amount of time that passed. Maybe he had some other catching up to do. And that could have created an awkward situation with their relationship a couple of weeks or months down the road when they ran into each other. And that could come up in if he's going to sell his house and he'll be like, ooh, I never called Donna back that one time. I'm not sure I want to have that conversation. I'm just going to call Susie, the neighbor, who's got her real estate license. So understand how impactful these little decisions and little tools, tips, and tricks in communication can really help us move along. Anybody else have any thoughts, ideas that they want to share on that topic before we move along?
So
Okay, then.
I have a question. What if I made the mistake of saying on a voicemail, you know, whenever you get a chance, just call me back, and they don't call me back? How do I follow up with that mistake?
Well, so, and look, the fact of just how you structured that question is reinforcement to why I say don't leave it, right? Hindsight's always 20/20. I wouldn't call it a mistake because that's what 99% of people do. They ask people to call them back, right? That doesn't mean that for our particular instance here, we should be, we should be using that approach. So I would say, if you had the ability in the short term, you can even drop a text to follow up on that and just say, hey, left you a voicemail. I missed you earlier. Left you a voicemail. No need to call me back. I know you're busy, but I'm always here if you want to catch up in the future, right? So you kind of take the foot off of that pedal that makes somebody feel obligated to respond to you.
I see. Thank you.
You got it. And I also, like I said, guys, this is really important in lead follow-up. You get a lead, anybody who gets an internet lead, right? There was a time a couple of years ago where the average incubation time for an internet lead was 18 months. 18 months. Most agents don't follow up on a lead for 18 minutes, right? They try it once, it doesn't work, boom, they're on to the next one. They say, these leads are garbage, right? It's not about the follow-up if there's not an immediate response. A lot of times in lead follow-up, you need to statistically, to realize the full potential of a lead, studies have shown that you need to follow up 10 to 12 times to realize that full potential. I believe the number was, on the first attempt, you were only realizing 15% of the probability of converting that lead. So if the probability of the lead was X amount, then 100% of it would be by contacting them 10 to 12 times. The first time you contact them is a very small, 15 to 20% conversion on that. And if on that first phone call, you tell them to call you right back or call me back, and they don't, you've already put this wedge in your relationship before you've even done it. Now, the next day you're calling them again. Now you're an annoying salesperson because I didn't call him back, right? He's calling me again. If you end that voicemail by saying something like, I know everybody's busy, so if I don't hear back from you today, I'll reach out tomorrow. Have a great day. You're even leaving it wide open for you to call again and it not be socially off for you to do that. So just a little tip that I wanted to put in there. And I didn't say that before we made the calls, just so that we can have maybe some real live examples of someone who did the opposite. And I rest on the fact that it's not that you did anything wrong or made a mistake, because that's how everybody communicates. It's just we can twist and turn these little things to make it far more efficient. Okay, so can everybody see my screen here? Getting our head in the game, right? So we're here with the focus to do a couple things. We want to close on time. We want to ensure a smooth process, and we want to win future business, right? So this is going to be maybe a little discussion. Let me hear from some of you guys on this call, some things that we can do to facilitate closing on time. Anybody out there? Any ideas for me? You can unmute yourself. It doesn't have to go in the chat box. Anybody?
I mean, I think this is Jamie, by the way.
Hi, Jamie. Thank you.
I think one of the things is that we have to, as a buyer's agent, stay on top of our buyers in terms of their mortgage process. If they kind of lapse in getting all of their documents together and putting them into the portal and all of that, and they're not on top of responding when the lender says, hey, I need this extra document, or I need this extra document, 3 days, 4 days, 5 days goes by without them getting it to them, there's automatically going to be a delay in getting the file to underwriting, which again will delay things even further.
That's a great one. I mean, I've had situations where the buyer did not submit the contract and the loan application for a month after we were in attorney review, because their agent didn't prompt them to do that, or their mortgage broker didn't, or their attorney didn't. So a lot of times we automatically think someone else is doing that, right? And now we're in a position where, hey, we're supposed to close in 2 weeks. You didn't even start your loan process. And the buyer is now pissed off at everybody else because nobody even told him he had to do it. Like, I don't know this business. This isn't my game. I know we were under contract. So, I mean, we can all make assumptions on whether somebody should have thought about submitting for the application for the mortgage. But Jamie you're 100% right. Immediately after we go under contract, right? That should be a conversation that we have with them, and sometimes with the mortgage broker too, to make sure that everything is facilitated. They have everything they have, and we start that process, because that's something that's completely out of our control. Anything else anybody can think of that we can do to ensure that we close on time?
I think, and along the lines of Jamie's point, is to be like organized and maybe have like a checklist of things that needs to be done a specific time and date, like inspection, attorney review, contract, stuff like that. Appraisal with a title, mortgage, etc.
Yep, and we're gonna get into those checklists here in a little bit, but that's that's really important. There's actually a whole bunch of things that we need to do, right? Some of which can easily be forgotten, especially if you get really busy, right? So we want to build our model. For those of you who have never sold a home, you want to build your model to handle 20 to 30 under contracts now and start running your business in that. So your first deal goes right into this whole process the same way as you would if you ran 20 to 30 contracts at any given time. So you're not constantly having to reinvent the way you do business. Because the truth is if you have one deal, it's really easy to remember all this stuff, right? But when you have 20 and you're not ready for 20, if you're still working off of those antiquated processes, it is not unheard of to show up at a closing and the attorney say, okay, where's the certificate of occupancy from the town? And there's a real awkward moment of silence and there's no CO, right? Or even worse, the deal closed, the attorneys didn't even catch that there wasn't a CO. And a couple of days later, them or the title company reach out and ask for a copy of the CO, and you say, oh my God, there was no CO. I've seen it happen. And there's a massive fine attached to that. But even more importantly, incredible amount of embarrassment because of the way that we handled the transaction, right? And that is the total opposite from that experience that we're looking to create so that somebody sends us raving fans. If our client knows that we forgot the certificate of occupancy and potentially created a big issue with the municipality, do you think they're going to feel comfortable, even if they love you? Are they going to feel comfortable referring you people in the future who are going to rest their opinion of them on who they referred them to? And the chances are they're probably not. They're just going to say, yeah, you know what? I'm just going to keep my mouth shut because I know, some things can go wrong there, right? So smooth process, same thing. We can talk through that. And then winning future business, I kind of just parlayed it into that part. We have to have that seamless experience. We can't have gaps. We can't have things falling through. So the first part of the real estate sales process is the hard, focused work of making connections and achieving agreements. This is where a lot of sales technique and skills come into play, guys. This is where Pat was saying we play matchmaker, right? And we make it all happen. A lot of agents find the thrill and excitement there and then hands off, right? I'll let the process take over. I'll let the attorney take over. And a lot of times that can backfire. The second part is the wide-eyed, vigilant guardianship of the transaction until it makes it to closing. Your role changes 100%. And now you are a process manager. You are a general contractor, right? Overseeing this whole thing, and understand that if anything goes wrong in here, guess who they're going to blame, whether it's your fault or not? You. Okay. And that's meant to put healthy pressure on the situation, because you can make this real easy by having a system that does it, or you can use your entrepreneurial spirit and just wing it. And sooner or later, I promise you, because I've been there, you're going to end up in a spot where something skipped, something slipped, and it's going to be you on the line, and you're going to have to explain your way out of it and apologize and hope that they forgive you, right? And understand that that probably lost you a few other future deals as well. So make it happen. Know the process. Systems equal success. Seize the golden opportunity. That's to get referrals. And then, of course, get paid, right? Know the process. I was on a call with a newer agent in San Francisco this is probably going back about a year. And he was like, Bill, I've been out with these buyers, and in San Francisco, the buyers start at $2 million, right? So he's like, I'm out with these buyers. I've never owned a home. These people have owned like 15 homes. I feel incredibly inadequate. I don't know what to say, what to do. And I just feel like I'm kind of going through the motions and I'm not really offering them any true value. And I said, do me a favor, Brandon, tell me what the process is of closing a house from contract written, offer written, all the way to closing. Tell me what that looks like piece by piece. And he couldn't do it. And I said, here's the hard news. You're probably not an incredible help to these people right now, right? The chances are, based on the response that I just got, where you don't even know the closing process, that they might know more than you do, which is not a good spot to be in when you're supposed to be their professional or fiduciary advisor. So I said, the good thing is this is something we can heal in about 30 seconds, not literally, but I want you to go to your TL and I want you to understand what the closing process looks like in San Francisco from the minute someone makes an offer all the way until it closes. And I want you to put it on an audio recording, a text message to yourself, or call yourself and leave a voicemail explaining the whole process from beginning to end. And then I want you to listen to it nonstop until you can recite it from beginning to end, till you know that closing process as seamless as the back of your hand, whether you've ever sold a house or not. And the minute that you own that part of the transaction, you are an incredible asset to that person. They might have bought 10 houses. If it wasn't in the last couple of months, or even if it was, the chances are they don't know the process like you do inside and out, whether you've ever sold a house or not. And then you are a ton of help and assistance to a potential buyer. And that should do a lot for someone's confidence too. If you're super nervous about working with the client because you're, oh my God, I've never done this before. I've never sold a house before. That's an interesting spot to be in. If you at least know that you know the process, more than 99 out of 100 buyers you're going to talk to, now you're in the driver's seat to really help facilitate that. So we got to first know the process. Second, we have to have a system in place to facilitate that process, to make sure that we have all of our T's crossed, I's dotted, and it makes its way along. And third, seize the golden opportunity, again, to ask for referrals. If we make this a good experience, this is the part where somebody knows their home is coming. They know you've successfully gotten them this far. This is the highest chance for them to be sending you referrals. And trust me, everybody that they're talking to, what are they talking about with them? Real estate, right? So you can use them to do what we talked about at the beginning of this call, where we said, Gene Rever said, the more conversations we have about real estate, the more homes we're going to sell. If we can make somebody else have conversations about real estate and of course, tie that back to us, that puts us in a really good spot to continue to do more business. Okay. Contract to close. So this is the cookie cutter process for KW Ignite, right? So offer goes in, we get rejection, acceptance, or counteroffer, acceptance, inspection, right? Rejection, inspection reply, acceptance, clear title, loan underwritten, loan funded or rejected, other escrow instructions, closing disclosure, closing, funds transfer, and then at the end, legal recording or owner possession. So guys, is this an accurate depiction of our closing process in New Jersey? Anybody? What pieces would be maybe missing here that we should probably focus on a little bit more in our area?
Is it an attorney?
Yeah. So unlike many states, and like some states, we have a process called attorney review. So right between that offer and the inspection part, there's a huge piece of the puzzle called attorney review that it goes into. And we need to be able to, one, articulate that to our clients beforehand, and two, monitor attorney review. And in some cases, for those agents who have been doing this for a decent period of time, can you guys put in the chat box for me if you have ever reached out to an attorney to try and check on or push along attorney review? So we got a bunch of whys and of course and always. So this is part of us being in that mix to make sure it's part of our job, Pat says. And unfortunately, some agents don't, right? They put it in review, it's there for 2 weeks, and they're like, I don't know what the heck's going on, right? We have to be hands-on in that to make sure that we're moving this process through, right? What else is a big problem in real estate today? I want to say problem because it's rearing its head based on the way that values have skyrocketed. Can anybody tell me another piece that's not really spelled out here in our contract to close process?
Appraisal?
Appraisal.
Yeah.
Appraisal, yep.
That's a big piece of that puzzle right there. So we need the appraisal done. It sounds crazy, but if you're managing 30 under contracts at one time, you have no transaction coordinator, and you're trying to do everything you can to keep everything afloat with no real system, I can tell you that it is not unheard of to be a couple of days from a closing and the buyer's agent call you and say, okay, we're having the appraisal this Friday. You're like, this Friday? We were supposed to close this Friday. And without you having had that as a tracking mechanism, it's like, oh my God, what if this thing doesn't appraise? My sellers have moved out. We're all talking about being, completely done here shortly. And this appraisal is still kind of hanging out there in the mix, right? So we got to make sure, guys, that we first know this process inside and out and that we have it tailored to our specific market. So we know exactly what that looks like and study it until you know it inside and out, and then refresh it every once in a while. Now, from my perspective, all of you should do this, and that is go over this process with your client at the inception of a contract, or at the very least on a buyer consultation. If you meet a new buyer, this should be part of the original conversation you have. And that's a real easy pull. I've never had an issue getting somebody in on a buyer consultation by saying, hey, we found by experience that for a buyer, a lot of the tension and pressure gets removed from the process if we just take 15, 20 minutes at the beginning to sit down, talk about the whole process so you know what the next steps are, so you know what to expect coming, and we can keep an eye on some of the dangerous parts so that we can make sure that we avoid them. How does that sound? And people are like, I'm in. I want to know that, right? I want to know what I need to be avoiding or what I'm worried about. And we can do the same thing with the seller prior to moving into under contract. I always give an entire breakdown. So Mr. Seller, here's what this process is going to look like. You do not have to remember all of these moving parts. I am always going to keep you up to speed on what the next two are so that we can handle this right in a measured way. But once these contracts are signed, it's going to go into attorney review. Once attorney review is complete, we officially go under contract. At that time, our buyer is going to have their home inspections. They're going to come in. They're going to give you a 50-page report, right? Even if this house is brand new, they're going to have a whole laundry list of things for you to fix. So when you see that, don't get upset, right? We're going to look through this, understand there's an attorney on both sides, and that's who's pushing to have all of those things there. Once we get through the attorney review, once we get through the under contract portion and our inspections, we're going to move to some of the banking things. And one of those big ones right now is the appraisal, right? So an appraiser's job is to look backwards at the last 6 months. The market's job, in order to secure a property, is to look now and sometimes even forward so that we can be in a position to outbid everyone else. So that's creating a situation where we are having some issues from time to time with the appraisal. If that does come up, we got to take a deep breath, assess the situation. We see if it's valid in the appraisal, or if it's not valid, we can try and appeal and just talk through a couple solutions there at that time. We'll then work through if you want to sell any items in the house, we can have that conversation with them after everything else is settled. We never want to be negotiating multiple things at the same time. The buyer will then do a walkthrough prior to closing. So when you move out, make sure that the home's in the same condition as it was, when we had our inspections, and then we find our way to the closing. Again, there's a bunch of moving parts, and even within them, there's a few nuances, but I don't want you to worry about it. We're going to walk through this whole thing together. Again, I'm going to let you know what the next 2 steps always are. Right now, we're focused on getting out of attorney review and scheduling home inspections, and we'll take it from there. Any thoughts, questions, or ideas, right? So we set the expectations up front. If there's one thing I want you guys to take from this today, is to have a smooth contract to close process. Do not rest on the fact that you know what you're doing, because even if you do, it can be a very uncomfortable situation for especially a high SC, right? Somebody who likes to control the situations. It's a very uncomfortable process for them to go through, not knowing what those next steps are. So we lay the whole thing out for them and say, we're going to talk about always the next 2, and then ask them if they have any questions, because they might want to talk through appraisal a little bit more now. They might want to talk about the inspection a little bit more now. For those agents who have handled listings, when a seller thinks their house is in great condition, and they get an inspection report and a list of 30 fixes for them to make, how does that conversation usually go? Anybody? All right, I'll jump in. Denial, I see there. Yeah, that's a good word. Most of the time they get upset, right? They'll have and a lot of times they're valid, but there's one thing that might be like really pushing it, and they'll be like, oh, this whole thing is BS, right? They get really upset because we didn't set the process right for them at the beginning. And I do the same thing with buyers, right? When a buyer is buying a house, and we have our buyer consultation at the very beginning, and I still do this today, and I don't work with buyers, right? But my team, when I do a buyer consultation with a member of my team, I explain the whole process, even the attorney review part, where I say, listen, this is a really important thing that you understand. Just because we have signed contracts and go into attorney review means nothing, right? In the state of New Jersey, in attorney review, any party can break any contract for any reason at any time. So don't run and tell your best friend and everybody on Facebook that you got your dream house, because 2 days later, we might get a phone call that says, hey, somebody else came in with the cash offer, you're out, right? And that is not a good feeling to have. Now, me setting those expectations up front, explaining the whole process, and then I'll talk about inspections and I'll flip it and I'll say, your inspector's job is to come up with a laundry list of 1,000 things, right? They're covering their own rear end. Our goal is to really focus on major items, safety concerns, environmental ones, things like that. We prepare the buyer for that list so that when they get the inspection list, they're not like, oh my God, this house is falling down. We prepare them for the appraisal. We have the conversation about how the appraiser's job is to look backwards. But in many cases, if you went off of a number that something closed for a month, 2 months, 3 months ago, you'll never get a property in today's market. So now they've come to peace with understanding that they may actually run into an appraisal down the road that could be an issue. So by laying all of this out in what I call the story, I use this in 2 different contexts in our training. We have the story or the process before we talk buyer or seller. It takes so much tension out of the process. You watch their shoulders go down, and they look at you differently as the person who's going to guide them through this, because you know this. But just as importantly, they now have some expectations of what's going to happen, and it removes the potential of blindsides. And a lot of agents get lazy in a natural way and skip these kind of things. But I can tell you the time that you will waste, 1, having to talk somebody out of making a bad decision, or 2, if the transaction falls apart and you now have to start all over in today's market, you have to show them 10 more houses. You have to begin from the very start and go all the way through this thing again. You would have saved 15 times that if we just took a moment at the inception of each contract to close process and reviewed the whole thing with them. And again, for those of you who are new to the business and you're not comfortable reviewing that whole thing with them, that should be your first and only goal. Understand the contract process, contract to closing, be able to articulate it to somebody, and then you are far more valuable than even 90% of the agents out there who, even if they do know it, aren't really explaining it to their clients in a way that helps them and removes the tension from them. Any questions, thoughts about that from that contract to close process. Just taking some notes here.
Can I say something?
Sure.
I had an experience today that I feel like would benefit other people. We'll close today, but the client wanted to know why she had to pay off her equity loan. The $60,000 that she owed on the house, she felt that she should just continue paying monthly and close and take that money. So I tried to explain to her that she can't sell a house without a clear title, and that loan has a lien on her property. She didn't want to understand. She didn't want to know anything about it. And at the end, I actually ended up connecting her with the attorney, and they had a talk. But I felt like if I just sent her to the attorney from the get-go, it would have been better. I think she was really agitated. So I just want to say, even if the question is as easy as that, I think that, sending them to the attorney right away is just, it would have basically, I would have avoided all that tension between us. I was nice. I wasn't mean, but I'm saying,
Sorry, you couldn't have put that any better. This is something I talk to our team about all the time. We as agents tend to put ourselves in spots where we don't have to be naturally, where we could be. But if there's an opportunity to make someone else the bad guy, take the opportunity. I hate to say it that way, right? We put ourselves in the middle of so many processes, right? When somebody says, hey, call the town. We recently had an incident where an agent called the town and was given the wrong information technically by the town, passed it along to the client, right? And now at the closing, there was a massive issue because that was incorrect. I would never call the town on behalf of a client, ever, 0 chance, right? And I would make sure I explain why I would never do that. And I would say, hey, listen, I would love nothing more than to take this off your shoulders and call the town. But I do understand that sometimes conversations are different and things change. So legally, I need you as the consumer to hear it directly from the source. So I'm going to send you the number for the town, and I'm going to need you to call them and get that information from the tax assessor firsthand, so that I'm not in the middle and that nothing can be misconstrued. In every case, people are like, okay, I get it. So as long as we explain it that way, that's really important. So in a situation like that, if somebody was really cool about it, Saray, I might have jumped into it just to keep it simple. But if I'm feeling any tension in there at all, there's an attorney and there's a mortgage broker, right? There's a whole bunch of moving pieces. If they're selling, they might not have a mortgage broker involved. But I would say, listen, it's my understanding that they have to clear all the liens on it would make the payoff necessary, but there could always be some other ways around it that I'm not aware of. So I'm going to invite you to just give a shout to the attorney and see if there's any other way to do it, right? Pawn it off, give it to the attorney. I mean, if an attorney's watching this, they're probably like, Bill, I would want to kill you, right? But at the end of the day, right, they're the ones giving legal advice, and it is our responsibility to maintain a great relationship socially with the client. We are the glue in the middle that are passing all these pieces along. So the minute that we lose that connection with our clients, or they start to get frustrated with us or say, hey, maybe they didn't tell me something, or they just feel like you're not listening to them, that can break down conversation in the future between the two of you. So any chance that I have, and that's my instinct, is to think, who else can deliver this bad news, right? If it's a mortgage guy with a buyer, I'll say, hey, do me a favor, just call your mortgage broker, right? And see if that's at all possible. I'm not sure if it's possible. We recently had a guy who called on a property. He's like, I want to do this. I want to have a side deal where I pay $50,000 extra and on the side, owner financing on top of the mortgage. And my response was, hey, that's a great idea. I'm not sure if it's allowable with the loan you're getting. So do me a favor and just call your mortgage broker and see. I know it wasn't allowed, right? They would never allow a side deal like that. But I'm not going to be the one to deliver that to somebody in our circle directly if I feel like they're in a situation where, they're going to be upset by it. As long as they get the right information is important, but I'm also not a mortgage guy. So why am I giving them the mortgage information? And who knows, maybe the day before some rule changed and now they're allowed to do it. So, sir, I think that's an amazing piece of advice to everybody here. And it's in certain moments, especially in this contract phase. If we get involved too much in an area we're not supposed to be, sometimes just taking that one extra step to put out a fire that the attorneys could have tried to put out first, it now becomes your fault and the attorneys fixed it, as opposed to letting the attorneys battle it out and then you can come in and save the day and fix it. There's a huge dynamic difference there as far as dialogue and the experience that a consumer gets throughout that process. So it was a perfect.
I actually put them on three-way. So I had all three of us on the phone, and the attorney told her exactly what I said, and she was okay with that. So yeah, so I should have just, we learned.
That's it, and that's the whole process. I still learn today and change the process. So, so throughout the entire contract to close process, guys, follow up regularly with the closing title and escrow company and the loan officer to be sure everything is progressing and on schedule. Let me ask you guys, and now I'm going to really start to get into how I operate and operated my under contracts. Most agents are just shooting in every direction every day. Zero process, or if they do have a process, it's not process based around dates. I will handle my under contracts one day a week. Tuesday is my under contract day. Okay. My clients all know it. My partners and closing title company, attorneys, everybody knows it. And I am able to do in one day, and it's usually about an hour and a half in the morning, to go through all of my under contracts, anything that needs to be done, and anything that could possibly come up in the next week to get me to next Tuesday. That is my whole goal. Keep this thing moving 1 week at a time. And next Tuesday, I review the whole list again. So God forbid something did fall through the cracks. Worst case scenario, I only miss a week instead of missing a whole closing period. So I know a lot of you are saying, I can't imagine just touching it once a week. I will challenge you on this. Not only is it more efficient, but the consumers love it. They absolutely love it. When you put a consumer in a process, just like when you explain the process to them out of the gate, all the tension leaves, right? When I list the property, my conversation with every seller is like this. Mr. and Mrs. Seller, I have a process. We are going to touch base with a market and marketing update every Thursday. If you don't hear from me on a Thursday, please call the police because something's terribly wrong, right? And I make a joke about it, but I want it to be so serious that it holds me accountable, where every Thursday I'm going to connect with my sellers. And I do. And if there's any feedback from the weekend, we'll get that over to you on a Monday. And any feedback from during the week, we'll get it to you on that Thursday call where I touch base with you. And you don't have to answer the phone. If you don't answer, I'll just leave you a voicemail with that week's update. How does that sound? Oh, that sounds great. I sold the house last year for my mother, and that guy, I didn't hear from him for 3 weeks, 4 weeks at a time. It is so comforting, again, to have them part of a process. So now they're already used to a process. By the way, when I handled buyers, I would touch base with my buyers at least once a week too. The ones that I wasn't out in the field with. If somebody hadn't had a house in a week, I would always hit them on a certain day. So they're expecting it. By nature, my brain is all over. So I have to create these systems to create orders so that we can scale, so that I can, as a sole agent, handle 30 under contract at one time without melting down and having 50 things going all over. All right. So as soon as we go into an under contract status, I call my seller on the normal seller date, which is a Thursday, and say, hey guys, exciting news. You no longer have to hear from me on Thursdays, but now we're going to be moving to a Tuesday call. And it's important that we have a Tuesday call a little earlier in the week, because with attorneys and all the professionals involved in the contract, if anything goes wrong, we need to be able to address it during that week. I don't want to do it at the end of the week where we might have to lose a weekend here. So every Tuesday, you're going to hear from me with an update and and what the next couple steps in that process are. Here's how the whole process looks. Only worry about the next two. That's what I'm going to keep you up to speed on. And once we reach closing, right, then you can finally break free from your weekly calls for me. How does that sound? Sounds great. Right, so the expectations are there, and we create that process where every single Tuesday I'm talking to them. If you have one deal under contract, guys, set it up like this. I'm telling you, the universe will give you a lot more if your system can handle a lot more. Fiona said, at what point in the contract to close process do you switch to a day earlier in the week? At contract. So my Thursday calls with sellers are until we get a contract. Okay. Even in attorney review, it's technically still active in my book because more offers can come in. So they're still on a Thursday cycle. I have my list. So the minute the next Thursday comes and we're officially under contract, I will call them and transition them to the following Tuesday, where we now go into the under contract phase of having a conversation every Tuesday. Let me see. Any other questions here you guys have for me at this point? Pat says, I tell them not to read the report, just the attorney letter and cross-reference it. They never listen. That's on the inspection. That's so true, because when they read the report, they're like, yeah, then they really lose it. All right. So success tip number 2, both agents should attend the closing and be a resource to their clients and be sure that items, keys, security codes, openers, providing access, security, and use of the property are turned over to the buyer. I am going to say that I do not agree with this, okay? And I'm free to say that. You're free to argue with me. Especially in COVID, agents really shouldn't be attending the closing, depending on the concerns of, the individuals, the buyers, and whatever. The less people we need there functionally, the better. The closing process has changed a lot to where 5 years ago, even most of the time it was buyer and seller, same room. Every once in a while, they even threw punches. It was an interesting experience. But now everything's separate, right? In almost every case, buyer or seller signs in advance, power of attorney to the attorney executes it, sometimes even virtually, right? And the closing doesn't really have a place there. So I would say it is not necessary for agents to attend the closing. If your client is attending the closing in person, I would recommend that you be there. Right? But most clients are not personally attending it. And for me, it's just a moral support thing, right? You saw it all the way to the end. You don't want them to think, oh, they got their check, now they don't care and they didn't show up, right? That's an important part. Or at least have somebody there on your behalf and say, I would love to be there. We had something else pop up. I'm going to send somebody there on my behalf, just in case anything pops up, they can get in touch with me. But understand at the closing, we do nothing. But I want to make sure you know that myself and my team are with you all the way through this thing. How does that sound? Oh, that sounds great, Bill. Thanks so much, right? So how we package it again, tying it into that experience to see this thing all the way through. And these items are important to make sure that the keys, security codes, and openers and everything are in place, because you don't want, after the closing, the buyer reaches out and says, hey, where's all this stuff? Then you call your seller and ask them, and the seller starts scratching their head and saying, shouldn't Bill have maybe done that beforehand? I don't know. So I would say to facilitate that in advance, plan ahead. Also a chance to thank your clients and ask for a referral. So that is true. You definitely want to, at the closing, ask for a referral. But you should have asked for a referral all along the way here too. So it should be just a reinforcement, a reminder, like, hey guys, I know this was a crazy process, right? I know it's stressful no matter how easy we try to make it, but thank you so much for your patience along the way. And I just ask you moving forward, again, if you know anybody looking to buy or sell anything, please pass them my way. I promise to take as good care of them as I just did you. Please let me know if you need anything else along the way, even if it's not real estate related. Right? And then my follow-up calls take from there, and I continue this relationship after the closing. So closing checklists. We have our buyer agent contract to close checklist and a listing agent contract to close checklist. Those should look completely different. right? And if you're on a team and everybody has different responsibilities, that's going to look different than if you're an individual and everybody and one person has all of those responsibilities. But we had mentioned it before, these checklists are really important. Be prepared up front. Do not wait until you get a contract to put a checklist together. Do not wait until you have 15 contracts to hone your checklist so it can handle 20 or 30. Millionaire real estate agent, step one, big models, right? Let's build our model big so we don't have to reinvent it every time. Let's create a spreadsheet. Let's create a checklist that gives us every single category. And by the way, let's put 30 lines in it. And our goal then is to fill that thing up. So we got 30 under contract. My business model as an individual agent is now prepared to handle 30 contracts. I know every Tuesday is dependent and focused on just handling my under contracts and making sure they are all done. And in the course of that day, I'll review the entire process. I'll make sure everything's in alignment. I'll call all of my clients and I'll call all the attorneys and mortgage brokers that need to be done so that I can continue this whole process. Build it now when you have one under contract, when you have two under contract, and begin that talk with your clients. Because if you convey to a client that this is what you do, this is how I handle my under contracts, I do this on Tuesday, they're not even going to wonder if you haven't had a transaction before. They're going to be like, wow, this person, they know what they're doing. There's a process in place. When I first started, I was 22. I used to get asked all the time how long I've been in the business, right? And I came to find out that it's not because of how I looked, because up until 5 years ago, I still looked really young for this business. The last 5 years or so, a lot of younger faces have come in, but it was because how we handle ourselves, right? 5 years ago, I still looked young for the business, but no one ever asked me how long I've been in the business or how many transactions I've done, because I came with a plan that told them without even telling them that I've done this before, right? And here is how things are going to go. And again, people love being put in those processes. So make sure you build out your checklist and that process and how it's supposed to go, and tweak it and add to it as it continues to go. Be a problem solver. We're going to go through this in a minute, but before I go through some problems that we're going to potentially solve here, I want to first talk about categories that would be in our spreadsheet, in our under contract spreadsheet. So starting last year, in full disclosure, I had taken all of my under contracts that I used to manage, and I've given them over to a transaction coordinator on my team. So now my Tuesdays are much different. Now my Tuesdays start at 8:30 with a call with my transaction coordinator. And instead of me doing all of those pieces, she has done them throughout the week and she reports to me everything. So we go right down my list of under contracts and we explain what has to happen. Is this something she can handle? Is this the phone call that I should make, right? And within 15 minutes, we can go through a list of 20, 25 under contracts and say, okay, now we have a plan for each one. And then throughout the course of the day, I will contact each of my under contract clients, keep them comfortable, talk about the next 2 steps, and really make that a nice experience for them as we move forward. But before I had that transaction coordinator, that was all on me. It was all on my shoulders. And this is somebody who, naturally has stuff flying in every direction. So that spreadsheet is going to be so vital for you guys to have every column in place. And when you put a deal under contract, you fill out every column with dates, with deadlines, with whatever it is. And then as each one gets done, you cross it off, exit off, exit off, exit off. So that when Tuesday comes, next Tuesday, and you sit there and you the whole spreadsheet across, you immediately can see the areas where you have a gap and make sure that you address those individually. So let's talk through, guys, some categories that would go in our under contract spreadsheet that we want to make sure that we track every Tuesday to see how things play out here. What would be the column put in here? Pat Lowe says, was appraisal done and is money in? Yeah. Pat, have you ever been close to a closing and it came up that the deposits weren't in? Yeah. Yeah, yeah. You're, hold on, you're on mute, Pat. Let me unmute you. It's still muted. I'm not sure why that's muted, but I know
Oh,
you're
here we
trying
go.
to. There
Um,
we go.
yeah, and that's why I put it on. I have it a spreadsheet in the drive in my computer, and I also have it on the wall in the office. And the only
Right.
reason I have it is in the drive was last year was us bouncing back and forth and working from everywhere.
Yep.
I
So
put
it's a
it in the drive.
great point, Pat. Really until about 2 years ago, Ron and I each had our own under contract boards in the office, which is fun as a team because sometimes his would get way longer than mine. And that was like
Yeah,
my
exactly.
motivation to make mine longer than his, right? So you
Mhm.
kind of had that little friendly competition inside, but each of our boards, I'm trying to see if I got one here. I got rid of them. Each of our boards had all of those columns in, so it was
Yeah.
visible to us all the time. And every week we would go through some of them and say, hey, what is this? What does has to be done here? Are we good? So I asked Pat that because I've had that happen. I had a deal a couple of years ago in Wyckoff where we were double-ended. One of my team members was the buyer's agent, and they breached a contract, completely backed out like a week before closing.
Oof.
Ghosted everybody. And guess how much was in the deposit?
0. Yeah.
Nothing. Nobody.
Yeah.
Right. And can you blame the attorneys? Sure. Right. But at the end of the day,
It's our job too.
yeah, it's
Yeah.
everybody. So
Yeah.
deposits are due. When this house goes under contract, we know attorney review letter said deposits are due 10 days after attorney review. So right in that date, right there in that spot, that's my
Mhm.
target date when deposits are due.
Mhm.
We know that the appraisal is still open, right? So that's
Mhm.
open. So we set appraisal and deposits. What else, guys? What other categories can we put in there?
Home inspections done. Home inspections. Look at my board.
Yep. Home inspection.
Mortgage commitment dates.
Mortgage commitment. Mortgage commitment's a big one.
Yeah.
Imagine that date passes 3 weeks and the commitment's still not in, and your seller finds that out from the attorney and calls you and says the commitment was due 3 weeks ago and you didn't say anything.
Mhm.
Imagine that, right?
Mhm.
And guys, when there's a lot going on, that's easy to miss. So we got our mortgage commitment date.
CO. I have reminders to get COs. Apply for the
CO's
COs.
important. Like I said, I've seen people close transactions without a CO, which is a big no-no. Anything else you guys can think of? I'll give you a big one, especially for agents in like Wayne that really focus here, that you should really add to your under contract list is a well test, right? So a well test is due by the seller in the state of New Jersey. And a lot of times people miss that. And if you end up a couple days before closing and a well test that takes a week to turn around hasn't been ordered yet, you, my friend, are going to be the subject of quite a bit of ridicule, right?
You learned that the hard way, huh?
Oh, I'm telling you, all of this has come from experience, right? So see,
Yep.
it used to start with 4 columns and it
Yeah.
has now grown to like this long thing where I make sure every single thing is buttoned up, dotted and crossed. So Kevin said now with COVID, COs are more complicated and take longer. That's 100% right. In some towns, guys, your CO in Clifton, for example, right? The closer you get to the closing date, the more expensive the CO goes. So if you decide to tell your seller to go get a CO 2 weeks before the closing, and they're now paying 4 times the amount as they would have before, they're going to say to you, why are you just telling me this now? Right? You want to have that whole thing, that process laid out.
It's that way in Wayne now too. It's up to $750.
Wow.
$750 to get it like a couple days before.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and
That's like one of the first thing we do when we go under contract, start the CO.
Yep. Yep. And we used to wait till last. We've really, we've moved that in a different direction. How about the utilities, guys? Right? Recommending that they switch over the utilities. That could be a source of frustration for a lot of people on both sides, right? So the buyer leaves the closing and somebody's like, hey, did you set up your utilities? No, nobody told me I had to do that, right? We want to have that set usually 2 days before closing. Once you got the clear to close from the bank, both sides should call in their utility switches. Anybody think of anything else?
What about, since you're going off of, well, what about like septic testing too, for those areas that might have septics?
Yep. So just so you know, the way that our inspection evolved is we had a separate column for septic inspection, because sometimes it's not done on the same day and other times that can drag out. More importantly, it forces us to look and make sure the house has a septic at that point. And I know this sounds crazy, but if you guys get to a point where you have a ton of business flying in each way, sometimes the simplest things can get missed. And if an agent on the list side maybe doesn't put it in the right place, that it was septic, or the buyer's agent doesn't input it properly, or they fill it out and don't put septic, you might miss a whole septic inspection altogether. And you don't want to do that, right? So it's more of a check and a balance. I have the separate septic thing. Is it on the same day? Is it on a different day? A lot of times we can close the home inspection contingency, but the septic is still sitting out there because it hasn't been completed or it needed repairs and another inspection. So we leave both of them as separate ones. That's a great point, Caitlin. One more, guys, that I want to make sure that we definitely add here is home warranty. So all of our columns, all of our property lines have a column for home warranty. It is so simple to have a transaction where either at the beginning or in home inspections, we negotiate a home warranty to heal some pain, right? And the seller's going to provide a home warranty in lieu of replacing the boiler and the AC system that's at the end of their life expectancy, and give a credit of $3,000. That sounds awesome until the closing is 2 months later and nobody remembers to do the home warranty. Now the transaction closes. Now 3 weeks, 3 months, 3 years, not really years because these things are only good for a year, but let's say 8 months have passed and the AC unit breaks down. And the buyer of that house picks up the attorney review letter and says, hey, I'm supposed to have a home warranty here. And everybody's like, oh my God, we totally forgot. We never put a home warranty on the property. Whose fault is that? I'll tell you, it's not going to look pretty on you as the agent either. So anytime we actually have a column, and we will not X out home warranty until we know at the end of the transaction that there is no warranty on it. So that forces us to let the title company or the attorney know at the end, hey, there's a home warranty on this. Make sure that's done and paid for at the closing so that it's registered and in place, because you don't want to be getting that call on the other end. Again, all of these came into play because there were moments where things were almost missed. There was one where we almost missed the home warranty. It was the last minute and the buyer asked for it. It was like the day of, or maybe even the day after closing. And I'm like, oh my God, imagine that would have been missed. And they had an issue 6 months, 8 months down the road. That will never be missed again. We will add a column now and go through this. And by the way, this sounds super complicated, but I promise you it is so simple. If we're just looking at this one spreadsheet, one morning, the same time every week, and going through, spending an hour and a half, making sure everything's buttoned up, all of the dates that are going to take place between now and the next Tuesday are all handled, so that by the end of Tuesday, after we've communicated with all our under contract clients, we can go to sleep, not look at anything else with our under contracts until next Tuesday, when it's time to start again and move on to that next phase. Any other thoughts or questions about that particular setup?
What about like scheduling a walkthrough? Would that be on the spreadsheet?
So I don't have that on the spreadsheet. You could. I just feel that in order to, that's kind of one of those things that are automatic for me, because in order to have the closing, we need the walkthrough. So I will avoid putting that down just because it's kind of an automatic. And I want to keep, as big as these spreadsheets get, we want to keep them as precise as possible. So I wouldn't, if I could avoid putting an extra column in there, I wouldn't. So some people might say, hey, it's scheduled for 6:30 the morning before, but I just think that it's necessary for the closing. So we could probably skip that particular one.
Okay.
Pat Lowe says she also adds green sheet and add to database to her list and the commission bill. So how awesome is that? When the green sheet's submitted to the office, check. When the commission bill is done, check. And add to database is a really important one, because what if your whole closing happens, you forget to bring them in or update their address, right? Because they moved, then what do you do? So I love that. That's a great piece, and that's not on ours. So beautiful. Anybody else? Any thoughts, input, questions on that particular piece? So it's kind of funny, guys. Like Ronnie said, yesterday on the sales rally that, anybody should plug in because it really changes the game. It's so simple. Like in theory, we could just say, hey, do this all one day a week, right? It makes life really easy. But so many people do that. So to have this process, to have these spreadsheets, to build them out in a way that you can handle double, triple what you're building today, and to focus on doing it one day a week will free you up to do so much more. But you might just want to take off the next 4 days. I wouldn't recommend it, right? But it will free you up to now go do what you want to do, and that's get more business potentially. As opposed to feeling like you're doing a million things all week long. And by the end of the week, you're like exhausted, but you could have been much more concise and focused and paired a whole bunch of those tasks together because it's called chunking, right? So we chunk that all into that one area and then go hands off to the following week. All right, so be a problem solver, guys. This is going to really be our last piece here. So it's 2:14. I'm looking to wrap up around 2:30 for us. We run into problems all the time. And one thing, I'm not going to say that I never get frustrated, but I can tell you that the more deals you do, Jane, who now works with our brokerage. When she was my office manager before, she used to say, no deals, no problems, no problems, no deals, right? We need to understand that there is a really good correlation between having business and having problems, and that's okay. Not only that, it's good. We have to embrace problems. Our job is very literally to be a problem solver. Again, this is where it comes back to what do we do? And a lot of people have said, we sell houses, we are in the customer service business, we're in the lead generation business. If you don't generate leads, you won't have any problems to solve. But we are very truly in the problem solving business. And the day that our process becomes so smooth that there are no problems to solve, there are no, oh my God, what do I do? That's the day the real estate agent disappears. That's the truth, right? So we need to be grateful in the fact that transaction, that problem needs our input in order to move it to the next section or session. In our brains, the way we approach something is dynamically different in how we feel in addressing it. Right? If we approach it as oh my God, this is the 10th problem, your disposition, your enjoyment of this business, and most importantly, the way that you convey yourself to your clients is going to be much different than if you're like, and I know this sounds nuts, but thank God problems, right? This is crazy. Just when I thought I saw it all, I see this. But if it weren't for all these problems, I might just run this whole business. Hey, Zillow, good luck figuring this problem out. Let's go, right? This is really where the rubber meets the pavement. And guys, this is where being part of a brokerage like this is a tremendous value. You have so many resources in this office that you can go to if you run into a problem. And a lot of times, if it's an elevated problem, they'll then go to a bunch of other people. And we, on our leadership calls, we have some pretty deep discussions about how to address certain things and find a way to mastermind to the right solution. So don't run from problems. Don't let problems frustrate you, right? But accept them and know that you are in this business. Expect the problem. It's going to come, and it's good, because if it wasn't, you wouldn't have a job. It's like being a full-time fireman, and then when the fire happens, you're like, oh my God, I can't believe I got to put out a fire, right? This is exactly the same thing. So guys, what are a couple of issues? Let's end it on this, that you're currently experiencing out in the field that we might be able to talk through how someone could potentially solve it. Yes, Judy, comparator, you can always reach out to someone. I didn't know you're on here, Judy. That's awesome. Anybody encountering, like, what's a problem? Saray did a great job a couple minutes ago by talking about a problem, you know, where didn't think she had to pay off of, you know, a home equity loan. But any other problems have popped up for you guys recently that we can talk about being a problem solver on? Any common problems in the business? Y'all really tired on me? Explaining a price decrease. Kevin, can you just be a little more clear on what exactly you mean by a price decrease? We'll give Kevin a second here. Give him one more minute. I'm not seeing anything. So explaining a price decrease. I'm not sure if he's thinking from a buyer perspective. A buyer's looking at a house and the price just reduced in a market that's really strong. How we explain that, or explaining it to a seller if their house hasn't sold. Explaining a price decrease, audio not working, on a listing to a seller. Okay, cool. So that was the second of where we're at. No problem, Kev. So guys, how would we address that with the seller? So the house is sitting. It hasn't. The seller's seeing on the news every day that it's the best real estate market in the last decade and a half. Any ideas on how anybody out there would solve that?
I could chime in.
All right. What you got, Pat?
I had one recently, right in Pumpkin Plains, where it took like 30 days to sell, which is totally unheard of in this market. And in the beginning, the offers came in right where they should have, like right where I said to price it, and they went like 30 grand high. So, I mean, I explain, as I was explaining this to him, thankfully we got an offer. We got a couple offers and it finally sunk in and he took it. But listings right now, they're selling within the first 2 weeks, period. You know, I mean, if you have 50 people in your house, which is definitely not unheard of in this market over a weekend, and you don't have offers on it, then you're priced too high. I mean, it's kind of clear.
Yeah. So what's funny is a lot of times you can use the same logic that they're using, like, hey, this is supposed to be a great market and my house is still sitting here, right? You get to flip that and you say, yeah, that's the scariest part, right? We're in an insane market right now. Everything's going right away, which really tells us that we are not where we need to be, that even in a great market, right, that's so strong right now, we're having a hard time gaining any traction.
The market speaks. The market speaks to us.
Right. And if we have traffic, like you said, if you have a bunch of showings, and that's even easier, right? Because a lot of times they want to blame the agent for not having an offer. Well, at least somebody make an offer and say, listen, here's our job. Our job's to drive traffic, right? So my brokerage, my team, we've driven 40 agents with buyers to this property in the last couple of weeks. Those are insane numbers. Unfortunately, they're seeing your house and they're seeing a whole bunch of other homes out there and they're making a comparison. And many of them have made moves on other houses because they didn't see the value here in ours. So what we need to do is take a step back, right? Take a look at this and say, do we want to adjust the price and move it now? Or hey, if you want, we can continue to sit back and see if the market catches up. But that could be a real dangerous position. So I always give them both options. I don't tell them what they have to do. Most people will move away from pain. Psychology, right? You're either moving toward pleasure or away from pain. Two ways of making decisions. And a human being will move away from pain before they move toward pleasure. So instead of moving toward the pleasure of getting money, they'll move away from the pain of it losing money and being a dangerous proposition. So I give them that choice there at the end.
I also have this conversation when I'm listing it as well, and I'll tell them, like, this is what should happen within the first 2 weeks. And if this doesn't happen, we have to regroup. We made a mistake on price. So that way, if I do have to come back after 2 weeks, which is kind of rare in this market, but I mean, it does still happen. You've already laid the expectations for it.
Big thing. We talked about it before, right? Putting the expectations out at the beginning allow you to handle the issue much easier when it comes time to do it. So Saray, what's that, Pat?
I have a listing I just put on the market, and they were adamant that they wanted to list super high. I told them, that's not my professional opinion. I'm not sure we're going to get traffic. They were adamant about it. So I just took a much longer listing contract, because my concern was they're going to list high for, 4 months, whatever they wanted. And it's going to sit there, and then the listing is going to expire, and then they're going to list with someone else at the exact price that I suggested they had done 4 months prior. So instead of going down that road when they were adamant about this ridiculous price, because the market's crazy and people are paying 50,000 over and all of these things, I just figured instead of losing the listing, I'll just take the listing and get a longer listing period, and then the market will show them they're too high when they're not getting showing requests, or the traffic isn't there, or the offers aren't there. Because I didn't know what else to do other than just lose the listing.
Right. So you made a business decision, right? Which in our business, we certainly have to assess what we're doing and whether it's gonna make sense or not. In a rising market, it very well may be justified to make that decision and take it at a little higher number and extend the listing. In a market, which we may see soon when things start to level off, or even worse, start to turn down, that same conversation may go very differently. And you might tell them to go list with somebody else, understanding that you're going to come in and save the day in 6 months. So,
Right.
Yeah. I mean, I think, there's probably, again, assess it. You let them know that they're making the dangerous move of pricing high, that it can actually cost them a considerable amount of money. Make sure that somebody else is present when they make the final decision, right? People don't like to own the decision. Most sellers will try to convince you that their house is worth more so that you make the decision. And they'll try to get you to agree to justify the crazy number they threw out, right? Like, oh, right, don't you think we should try this? Like, no, I actually don't. And by you not allowing them to give you that ownership of that decision is really important. And I say, especially in a time when you have two decision makers, always make one of them make that final decision in front of the other one, so you can put the blame on them. And I hate to say it that way, and you're going to do it tastefully, but you will watch and see a lot of people will not make that decision if there's another party present, because it'll be, in many cases, one party wants to own the decision of making the right move financially for the family, for the couple, whatever it is, right? So they're like, nope, I'm adamant, we're going to go 50,000 higher. And that's fine. If we allow them to make it and say, I need you to understand, just like Jamie said, in my professional opinion, right, you were significantly overpricing for the market. All of the market surges that we've seen take place are happening on homes that were actually priced in alignment with the market and pushing up, not in ones going way up and casting down. And the danger in this is if it does not sell, we will now be one of the few that didn't sell in this market and begin to have to reduce the price, which will take away all of our strength as the seller. And in many cases, statistically end up getting us a lot less than if we started right to begin with. So it's this weird, dichotomy. And I want you to know that as a professional, I don't advise you to make that decision. However, if that's a decision that you really want to make and take that risk and gamble, right? Because let's be honest, The kid who grew up in this house could have won the lottery last week and be willing to pay $1 million for it. You never know, right? But what are the chances of that happening? And if you want to make the decision to list there, I just want to make sure that you've thought that through, right? And if we do have to have a conversation in a little while, that, you know, that we understand that I was really pushing for us to consider a different opportunity or option here. So is that risk, is that gamble something that you're willing to take now at the 550 mark, where I'm recommending 500 based on what the market's giving us?
Yeah,
And
that, I like that. That's good. I'm going to use that.
Yeah, because
Bill?
yes.
I was just going to say, then the other issue that needs to be explained is the appraisal process.
Right.
Because even if they get such a high price, if it doesn't appraise, it still needs to be renegotiated.
Right. Yep. Totally. We're going to have a challenge for an appraisal at that number too. And I always say I'd be much more willing to take up that challenge and prepared if I got 6 offers that pushed us there instead of one random offer that's high, right? It makes my dialogue with the appraiser much easier. But again, a lot of people, especially if one of their spouse, are going to be less, you're going to get much more of a, you know what, we'll think about it kind of thing, because now they know that they're not going to be able to blame you if this thing doesn't sell. Now it is their fault. And it was clear in front of people. You'll notice that a lot of people want to handle those types of conversations in a one-on-one setting so that they can avoid being the person to blame. And for those of you who are new to the business, this may come as a surprise. For those of you who've been doing this a while, it's not. If you had the same conversation I just had with somebody one-on-one in 2 months, and you called them and said, hey, look, we really got to talk about adjusting the price, they're going to talk to you like it was your idea to go on at that higher price. Like they completely forget about everything, right? The human ego is very, let's say, less inclined to take blame when they can point it at someone else. And, oh, you didn't push back hard enough, right? You didn't. Some people even get it in writing. That's why I love making sure that conversation, when we're talking about someone making a decision that could be risky on price, happens when there's 2 people present, because people are very mindful of that and they understand that moment is a big risk for them because they're putting it on their shoulders. I'm giving them that hot potato. I'm giving them the cards and the dice and saying, hey, you want to play, right? You want to gamble with this? That's your call. I'll do my best. That's what I know, but I'm not recommending it. It could work. But the chances aren't great. So, all right, guys, let's just see if there's anything in these last couple slides. Just a couple quotes here. Agents have 2 agendas. 1, to move the current transaction toward a successful closing, and 2, to ensure referrals. Most agents don't get that, right? So the smoother that process is, and that at every process, at every point, we should be asking for referrals. Gene Rivers' team, every week in those base touch calls that they have, they also ask for referrals. Is there anyone else you know that I could help right now? Right? And you can even make a joke about it. Hey, I know this question gets annoying, but is there anybody else that you know out there that myself and my team can help at the moment? No, you're instilling that. You're drilling that mind share that we talked about 2 hours ago. And connecting that to you and real estate, and also to creating that referral piece there. National Association of Realtors reports that 88% of clients say they would use their real estate agent again, but only 12% do. That is an insane gap, and it is all because we don't do what we talked about at the beginning here, and that's maintain contact, maintain mind share, maintain connection in a tasteful way, not in a pounding phones and drilling for leads kind of way. So don't be in that 70% that loses touch with their past clients. Leverage command, leverage your neighborhood nurtures, even the simple stuff. We all know that there's pieces of command that are not where they need to be yet. That's perfectly fine. It's free, the neighborhood nurtures alone. And if you have everybody set up on that bi-weekly, that's 24 touches a year that you don't have to do to continue to win that mind share in the mind of your prospective clients or people in your sphere. And then the last part this talks about, guys, is tokens of appreciation. Closing gifts. I will be honest, I don't give closing gifts. It's just not something that that I did from the beginning. And then I got to a point where there was a ton of transactions, and how do I do it here and make it scalable? And we are under some pretty strict rules with gift giving in New Jersey, right? I believe the limit's $25. So be careful on what you're giving from a gift perspective, number one. Number two, if you're going to give anyone, make sure you give it to everyone, because the worst thing that can happen is someone go to a friend's house and have like this beautiful Cutco selection, you bought them, and them say, where'd you get that? And they said, oh, Bill, he bought it for us in the house. And said, you never got me anything, right? And you can damage a relationship right there by trying to do something pleasant. So I say, you want to be able to show appreciation. I think that's really important. I support anybody in doing that. I'm not one to sit here and advocate stuff that I don't do. So personally, I don't. So I'm not going to spend a whole bunch of time on gift giving. But I will say, whatever you do, keep it fair, right? Keep it across the board. And in my opinion, the greatest gift you can give someone is an incredible experience in selling the home and in building yourself an incredible process that lets you manage that experience in a way that is replicable, simple, and duplicable. And if you do all of that, right, then the rest of this falls into place. You don't need to be buying $500 bottles of wine and gift certificates to the nice local restaurant to reinforce that relationship. And then the relationship is built even more so on real estate, so mind share with your process. So action plans, guys, moving forward. Prepare for your final Ignite class. This is going to close. There's only one more here. Recall and remember the things that we've talked about. We're going to go from ahas to achievement. So guys, we have to implement, right? This sounds great today, but if we don't start to build what that spreadsheet looks like, maybe Tuesday is not the day for you. Maybe you want to do this on Mondays. Maybe you don't have any closings at all, but you could still write the process of when you get these under contracts, how you're going to handle them. Do that now. So we move from, that's a great idea, to actually achieving it, and continue to enhance your learning. Plugging into stuff like this is amazing. I give you all credit for staying on this long, because I'm sitting down now because I'm running out of gas. But I thank you guys so much for your time, focus, and energy here. And everybody have a great day. And thank you again for tuning in here.